I've learned over many years in different vocations that one of the keys to personal well-being and keys to success in leadership is having a secure sense of personal identity. In other words, knowing who you are. I think that sense of personal identity is really your soul. It's something that's very valuable. And the cost of acting on your principles might be the cost of selling your soul. It might be the cost of abandoning that integrity, that wholeness of who you are. The integrity means that who you are on the inside, what you believe in your core, is who you project on the outside and who you will be in any facet of your life. And to be one person in one context and to change your identity in another context is highly counterproductive to success in life. And so I certainly weighed those costs when I was thinking about the decisions that I had to make. And I also had to measure whether or not I was willing to live with betraying the truth and betraying people that had stood up for what's right. Those are the costs that I considered, but I certainly am, in the end, thankful that I found the courage to be able to speak up and say what I believe to be true. I believe there's plenty of evidence that in the business world or in the political world, in any kind of leadership role, people are looking for leaders with principle, leaders with ethics and integrity. And one of the things I would say to students is you need to know what you value. You need to know what the core principles of your person are, because sometimes you're going to be put to a test without having had a whole lot of advance warning. And so having identified your own sense of vocation is important, and asking yourself the question, if you are put in a position where you have to choose between power and prestige and profit versus honesty and integrity, are you going to be able to give up those privileges that many people in leadership enjoy? And so recognizing that you don't always know what it's going to cost you, I believe that being prepared ahead of time to decide what you are going to prioritize when it comes to those really hard decisions in life will stand you in good stead when you get put to the test. I think part of what helped me to deal with some of the hard things that happened after my resignation were a sense of perspective, a sense of what really matters the most, and who do I need to listen to. You know, there will always be haters, there will always be people who will criticize decisions that you might make, but I knew that the people that mattered the most to me, my family, my dear friends and close colleagues, trusted me. And I think the other issue around perspective was that while what I went through in 2019 was extremely hard, it wasn't the hardest thing I'd gone through in my life. I had experienced other very hard things, including the sudden death of my firstborn daughter. Our daughter Emily died when we were living in Niger in 1991, and that was the worst thing in my entire life. And so when people say hateful, cruel things on social media, part of me is saying, you know what? You can't take away my family. You can't take away what matters most to me. And I don't need to internalize the hatred because I have with me the things that matter to me most. I would say that when I made the decision around resigning from cabinet, I didn't do it out of a sense of achieving anything or gaining or benefiting from that decision. In a sense, I didn't really have a choice. It came down to two options that I had. One option was essentially to lie, to say things that I didn't believe, to support things that I didn't believe, or to resign. And when I came to the point that those were the only two paths that I could choose, I had to take the option of resigning. So I didn't necessarily believe that there would be benefit. I didn't quite know what the cost would be about it, but I believed that it was something I needed to do. I had to stand up for my principles, and I had to stand up as well in support of another person who was very much maligned, misunderstood, and mistreated, and to choose to be not a bystander but an ally was very important to me in that decision. I do sometimes think about whether I would do anything differently in hindsight, and I've thought a bit about whether or not I could have worked harder to propose that the players involved in the situation be involved in some kind of a restorative justice process, a circle of healing, some people call it, following Indigenous practices, and whether there might have been a way that I could have pushed to bring people together. But overall, I would say I don't think I would change anything. And in fact, I've thought about why it is that the person who has, in a sense, been the victim of an abuse of power is the person who has to think through what they should have done differently, as opposed to the people that I had to stand up to. I actually thought about that recently when I read in the paper, in the Globe and Mail, about a young woman athlete by the name of Megan Brown who had to speak up against someone who had been abusing her. And if I may, I'll just read what she said, that that's not how abuse of power works. The one in a place of power stays protected by the victim because the victim has too much to lose in speaking the truth. The victim is the one who suffers, who is ostracized, who is labeled, who is forced to rebuild their life, while the person in power contributes to reap the benefits of their power. And so, to a certain extent, to put it on the person who has been, in a sense, the victim, although I don't like to necessarily put myself in that place, is to subtly place the blame for a situation on the person who did speak up, who was the whistleblower. And so I think that the question of how to manage things differently needs to be asked in a very thoughtful, well-rounded manner. I learned that it's worth speaking up, that standing on the side of truth is always worth it, that retaining your personal integrity is something that is to be valued at all costs. I, of course, had the privilege of having a sense of knowing that I would be able to find another way to put food on the table, for example. And not everyone's in that position, and so I am very much cognizant of my own privilege in that area. But I would certainly say that as leaders, standing up, speaking the truth, making sure that you choose the side of justice is always the right thing to do. I will always be a huge fan of encouraging people to exercise their voice and to speak up, even if you don't know what the cost will be. I always, when I say that, want to acknowledge that not everyone has that luxury. There are lots of people who have to stay in very hard jobs or abusive relationships because they don't have any other option, and those are the most difficult circumstances. But if one can possibly see a way forward and put one's job or position on the line, if you know that that might be a potential cost, it's absolutely worth it. I have found over time, both for myself and others, that history treats people kindly if you choose to stand on the side of truth. And I think that the other really important thing is that you give courage to others. Probably the biggest lesson I learned in all of what took place in my life in 2019 was that one of the greatest purposes of it all was that it has given other people strength, and I'm thankful for that. I have young women in particular who come up to me all over the country in grocery stores and airports and on the street, and they say, thank you, you've given me the courage that I need to be able to speak up when I am facing a difficult circumstance. And so don't ever forget that what you do, what you model will matter to the people around you. It will set the right tone, a tone of truth and honesty in your place of work, and that will always be valuable.